The EU will collapse in 30 days. Vladimir Vladimirovich Putin. In a historic speech before the Valdai Forum, Russian President Vladimir Putin made an apocalyptic prediction that could seal the fate of our continent. His words, spoken with icy determination, are a direct declaration of war on the heart of Europe. The EU will collapse in 30 days. It is not an empty threat. It is an ultimatum, a countdown to doom. What is behind this shocking prophecy? Putin underpinned his prophecy with a series of brutal warnings and accusations. He accused Europe of sabotaging any peaceful solution through its policy of constant escalation in the Ukraine war. He threatened incalculable countermeasures to the buildup of European armies, especially the German Bundeswehr. And he warned the US against supplying long-range Tomahawk missiles to Ukraine, which would lead to an absolutely new qualitative stage of escalation. Putin's message is clear. You have gone too far. You have made peace impossible, and now you will pay the price. The collapse of the EU is not just his prediction, it is his stated goal. Putin accuses Europe. Europe, according to his thesis, is solely to blame for the continuation of the war against Ukraine that he ordered. Many countries here would have tried to find a peaceful solution to the conflict, he says. He is referring to the months-long, ultimately failed mediation attempts by US President Donald Trump. But the European countries, with their policy of constant escalation, are responsible for the fact that this did not succeed. It is a masterful distortion of the facts, a twisting of the facts that is routine for him, as one commentator in the source text calls it. He, the aggressor who invaded a sovereign country, who is responsible for the horrors of Bucha-Irpinsk, stylizes himself as a victim, the victim of a war-hungry European elite. He ignores that he himself rejected Trump's peace plan, which would have been very favorable for Russia because the concessions were not enough for him. He ignores that Moscow sticks to its maximalist demands, which include Kiev's renunciation of NATO and its own territories. The accusation is followed by the threat. Putin turns his gaze directly to Germany, to the plans of the German government to make the Bundeswehr the strongest in Europe. We are following the increasing militarization of Europe closely, he says. In Germany, for example, it is said that the German army should become the strongest in Europe. All right, we hear that. Let's see what it means. His words are a thinly veiled warning to Chancellor Merz. A warning that is unmasked by one commentator as what it is, proof that the build-up is exactly the right way to go. And then comes the open threat. No one doubts that Russia's countermeasures will not be long in coming. What countermeasures? He does not mention details. And it is precisely this vagueness that makes the threat so dangerous. Is he talking about cyber attacks, economic sanctions, or military strikes? He urgently warns the US against supplying long-range Tomahawk missiles to Ukraine. The use of such weapons would not be possible without US involvement and is therefore dangerous. It could damage relations between Russia and the US and lead to an absolutely new qualitative stage of escalation. After uttering his military threats, Putin turns to the political dimension, and what he then says makes the world freeze. He speaks about the internal strife of the European Union, about the economic problems caused by the self-destructive sanctions, about the social tensions caused by mass migration, about the political paralysis that has gripped the continent. The European elites, according to Putin's analysis, are waging war against their own peoples. They are sacrificing the prosperity and security of their citizens on the altar of a globalist ideology. They have lost touch with reality. And then, with a voice that leaves no doubt as to his conviction, he speaks the words that sound like a judgment. This artificial bureaucratic construct, which calls itself the European Union, has lost its legitimacy. It is rotten from within. It is doomed to failure. Count what's there. The hall is shrouded in icy silence. No rustling, no coughing, only the oppressive weight of these words. He pauses for a long dramatic moment, as if to force everyone in the room to feel the weight of his prophecy. I predict that the European Union, as we know it today, will not survive the next 30 days. It will break apart on its own contradictions. It will collapse in a storm of economic collapse, social unrest, and political revolt. 30 days, a countdown to doom. Is this just propaganda, or is it the ice-cold analysis of a man who knows his opponent's weaknesses exactly? The commentators in the source text seem to agree with him. One describes Russia as a country stuck in the 20th century, ultra-miserably managed. A country that starts a war it cannot win. He calls Putin the most pathetic figure of the century. But is that the whole truth? Or has Putin perhaps hit a sore spot with his criticism of European self-destruction? What do you think? Is Putin's prophecy just scaremongering? Or is there a grain of truth in it about the state of the EU? Vladimir Putin's prophecy of the collapse of the EU in 30 days seems like a political earthquake. Never before has a Russian president so openly predicted the downfall of the Western alliance. The words are not chosen by chance. They are a calculated blow against Europe's already fragile self-confidence. The question that arises is it an empty bluff, a psychological trick to deter the West from further sanctions? Or is it a strategic plan in which Moscow is active? Networks of disinformation, cyber attacks, economic pressure and diplomatic divisions are used to erode the EU. Observers recall Georgia in 2008 and Crimea in 2014. Even then, threats were followed by concrete actions. The European Union is in one of its most serious crises since its foundation. Economically weakened by energy shortages and inflation, politically divided between North and South, West and East, and in terms of foreign policy dependent on the protective umbrella of the USA. Putin's threat does not fall on deaf ears. It hits a continent that is already on the verge of internal collapse. At the same time, Putin is staging himself as a pragmatist on the world stage. His surprising signal to support Trump's peace plan in the Middle East seems like a chess move that makes him appear as a mediator. While he destabilizes Europe, he presents himself in the Middle East as a guarantor of order, a double game that makes him a serious counterweight to the West, in the eyes of many states in the global South. It is precisely this ambivalence that makes Putin so dangerous. He can play both the warrior and the statesman. He can extend one hand for cooperation while the other undermines the foundations of Europe. For the EU, this means a test of strength like no other. The next 30 days will show whether the continent is able to act together or whether it will become entangled in its own disputes. Will Europe stand together, or will it break down into national self-interest and thus fulfill Putin's prophecy itself? One thing is certain, Putin's ultimatum is more than just a political maneuver. It is a declaration of war on the entire Western order. If Europe fails now, not only will the EU fail, but peace in the world will also be in acute danger. The countdown is running, and every hour brings the decision closer.